Welcome to our last session on SEBI, and today we'll be discussing insider trading, market manipulation, and other things related to insider trading. We have with us here Miss Purvi Kemti. She took another session previously in this masterclass, so I know that you guys know her already, so I won't bore you guys much. Please take the reins, ma'am, and do pay attention. This is one of the most interesting parts of SEBI. People like to hear about insider trading and all the scams that happen. So I'm sure you guys will enjoy the session.
Hello everyone, Namaste. So we are at the end of this master session on SEBI. We have spoken so much about insolvency and everything else. But the most important thing, insider training, is it's very important because for the effective functioning and governance of a corporate organization. So insider trade to eliminate insider trading, it's very important to ensure transparency, openness, and disclosure. And to achieve these attributes, it is very essential to maintain a positive relationship among the managers and the stakeholders, and to also gain the faith of the investors. How do you do that? If there is insider trading going on within a company for its shares, for its stocks, it becomes it's almost impossible for the investors to gain faith in that company. Also, it becomes very harmful to the economy, which we will get to know in during this seminar further. Usually, investors are usually attracted by good corporate governance, and this increases their reliance of the companies, the board of directors, and other very important, the promoters of the company. They play a very major, they play a major role in deciding the future of the company, right? So the decisions of the board can affect the stock market reaction towards investors. Hence, the meetings and decisions, the meetings of the board, the decisions of the board, they amount to confidential information. Now, this confidential information is only shared, which is when it is required for the benefit of the company. We see advertisements like a new project is coming. We see that on Netflix and even on Amazon. Sometimes we see that this not sometimes, actually more often than not, we see that new series is coming up. So their promos and stuff. Even when we go to the movies, we see different promos of different other movies other than the one that we are actually going to see. So what happens? So there is some company who is making these movies and producing them, and there's so many people involved. So what happens with this? The prices of the shares increases. Whoever is, for example, if somebody is casting Amir Khan in their movies, so it is highly assumed that the movie is going to be a hit movie, because he is considered like a perfectionist and stuff like that. So whoever is making that movie will, whichever company is making that movie with Amir Khan casted in it, will try to promote their company before getting in the theaters, right? So this cannot be considered as sensitive information. Like, we cannot say that this information is spread, so now the prices of the shares of the company that is producing that movie will go up. Now this is something, this will happen only when the dates are finalized. You will get to see the promotion of the movie when 90% of the job is done. So we will discuss how in detail what is insider trading, what is the confidential information that this should not be leaked, and who will get affected, who will be held accountable. Okay. Now, since we know that confidential information is only shared when it is required for the benefit of the company, hence it is very important to maintain that confidentiality until it is disclosed in the public. Now, it has been observed over the years that to gain an unfair advantage over others, the people working in the organization manage to get their hands on confidential information, which is very easy for them, right? And often they engage in unfair trade. Now, this is an unfair practice and it is also morally wrong, which can have very bad consequences. Hence, it is very essential to curb these practices globally. In fact, globally it needs to be curbed, and there are steps taken by different governments to prohibit such practices via, where different regulations in their respective countries. Now, the problem of insider trading emerged with the introduction of the concept of trading of securities in the global market, right? Now, in India, SEBI regulates the functioning of the capital market. We have already established that. Now, this SEBI was formed in 1992 under the SEBI Act 1992. Now, it was very necessary for the protection of investors to enact this legislation, right? So, an authority was established that can regulate the securities market effectively. Now, when an act is formed, we all know that there are so many committees that gives its recommendations. So many things goes through when an act comes into place. So, likewise, in 1952, it was recommended by Bhabha Committee. Then there were so many different committees that got involved in this, which eventually led to the formation of SEBI Act. Okay, so in 1952, it was recommended by the Bhabha Committee to make it obligatory for the directors to disclose the information of sale or purchase of shares in different register managed by the company. Right? Before 1952, it was very hayward, like it was here and there, and it was not very organized. Not a separate register were maintained. So consequently, Section 307 and Section 308, which provides for the maintenance of register by the companies, and Section 308 prescribes the duty of the directors and the persons and the other very important persons, like deemed directors, promoters, to disclose various their accounts, their shareholding in different companies, their shareholding in that particular company, or other assets and liabilities. So in under Section 308, this is mentioned, and this was introduced in the Companies Act 1956, okay, by the scope of this section of 308. Now, next committee, this committee was in 1952. Then the next committee was formulated in 1978, which was called the Sachar Committee, which recommended to make stringent laws to acknowledge transaction details of traders, so it can be identified that no unfair gain has taken place by using any price sensitive information. Time and again, new committees were formed, and again in 1986, a committee which was headed by G.S. Patel prescribed the term insider trading in their report, recommending to amend the Securities Contract Regulation Act, which is also popularly known as SCRA. In the recommendation was to amend the SCRA 1956 to allow the exchanges to implement strict policies to prohibit insider trading of information. Then again, another committee in 1989, it was recommended by another committee called Abid Hussain Committee to include the act of insider trading under civil and criminal offence. And it was also just suggested for stricter regulation by SEBI to restrain the unfair practices of insider trading. Right? Now, so these committees are formed, they give their recommendations, they give their advice, and eventually an act is formulated, right? So in the year 1992, we all know that Harshad Mehta scam also happened before 1992, which restructured our securities market. I'm sure many of you might have even seen that movie in which Abhishek Bachchan played the role of Harshad Mehta. So in 1992, the SEBI Insider Trading Regulations Act was enacted, and these regulations were again amended in the year 2002. Okay. Now, what is insider trading? So, insider trading is basically, it is a practice of using confidential information which is unpublished, first of all, and it is also price sensitive. Okay, it is unpublished, which means it is not open for general public to know, and it is also price sensitive, which means that such information is something that will drive the price of the particular stock or particular security of a company, which should be traded in the stock exchange. So this unpublished price sensitive information is not known to general public, and it is not public. It is not published, and it is related to the decisions taken by the board of directors of the company. Okay, so using this confidential information to use such information and to cause wrongful gain or loss is termed as insider trading. Now there could be wrongful gain also, and there could be wrongful loss also. Where by using this information, such practice is known as insider trading. Okay, this information is usually termed price sensitive. Why? Because it is capable of. Okay, so basically insider trading, if we look at the definition per se, insider trading is an act of buying, selling, subscribing, or agreeing to subscribe in the securities of the company directly or indirectly by the key management personnel or the director of the company who is anticipated to have access to this unpublished price sensitive information. Okay, with this will be in reference to the securities of the company, and this is deemed to be insider trading. Okay, now information is said to be price sensitive if it is not published anywhere. Okay, if there is something that Pepsi is coming up with another soda drink which will be made up of lemon, and there are, they will be coming up with this project in by the end of this year. If they are, advertising this all over, then that will probably increase the price of the shares of Coca-Cola maybe. But this will, if this is advertised everywhere, then it is not supposed to be price sensitive because it is published everywhere, right? So information is said to be price sensitive if it is not published anywhere, is related, first it is not published anywhere, second is related to the decisions of the company. If known, it can affect the price of the securities of the market. Okay, now there are certain things which will amount to be the unpublished price sensitive information, like financial statements, like declaration of dividends, like public rights issue, merger or amalgamation of information by authorities, information of demergers, policy revision, or change in the operations of the company. Like, unpublished data will be termed as price sensitive unpublished. Okay, when trading is done by keeping in mind all the regulations and rules of fair trading, it is termed as fair trading. Whereas when trading is done by violating such rules and regulations of for unfair gain, it is termed as unfair trading. So similarly, unfair trading is termed insider trading when such trading takes place by involving the use of unpublished price sensitive information. Now, it is ethically and morally wrong to share such information in the market in the first place, as this provides an unfair advantage to the person possessing the information, whereas the traders not having that information are left at a disadvantageous position. Somebody who has this information beforehand will have an unfair advantage over the person who does not have that information, right? So in India, members of a company can trade in their company stocks subject to disclosure of transaction records. Like for example, I work in Reliance. Now, that doesn't mean that I will be barred from trading in the securities of Reliance company, right? So members of a company have that option to trade in their company stocks, but it is subject to the disclosure of transaction records to maintain transparency and restrict the use of confidential information. Okay, now SEBI has framed several regulations on disclosure by insiders to bring the investors into confidence and ensure transparency in trading. Now, otherwise, what will happen if the investors do not have any confidence regarding the transparency in trading? They will not invest. Like, nobody will invest in a company who think that there is insider trading going on, and such news spread like fire in the forest. Okay, So to ensure this fair market trade, the practice of insider trading is made a punishable offense in the country. Okay. Now, who is an insider? Who can be considered insider? Now, insiders can be referred to as persons who are in a position to access confidential price sensitive information connected with the company. Okay. They use such information against uninformed investors in making huge profits before it comes to the knowledge of the public. Now, the term insider has wide interpretation, and it includes partners, directors, officers, and employees of a company and related companies, or persons holding some kind of official relationship with the company, professional or business, like, for example, auditors or consultants or bankers or brokers, such professionals which work for a organization, or government officials, stock exchange employees, etc. These are all called, these can be termed as insiders. Okay. It is very important to note here that the board of directors and employees have direct access to such information, and therefore they are in a position to use such information in the manner they want. Now, there can be instances where the insider can supply information to an outsider and hence deal with the outsider without letting the blame fall on him. Now, the insider can engage in many other malpractices and remain unnoticed. Hence, it is very important to point out such deficiencies in the system. Now, so the basis of insider trading is basically the exchange of securities willingly on receipt of some piece of confidential information that is not publicly available and which has the potential to affect the price of these securities drastically, right? For example, a director of a company is aware that the company is in a bad financial state, okay, and he sells his shares in the company, knowing that there will be an announcement made to the public about the cut in the dividend, right? Similarly, the director would be engaged in insider trading if he buys more stocks in a company or receiving. Sorry.
हाँ आपका पासवर्ड तो वापस चेंज कर दिया
Hello.
Yeah. Sorry, ma'am. I was having technical issues. I am back now.
Okay.
चलो
So,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, as I was saying that, if I was giving an example that a director would be engaged in insider trading if he if he receives an information about discovery of something very important on the company's land, right? So he will be engaged in utilizing any information that he thinks is beneficial before any public announcement is made, and he expects that the price of the stocks are going to be rise based on such announcement. And if he does any kind of trading in his shares, then such a thing will be insider trading. Thus, an insider who knows that the company is in a financial mess may sell his shares in the company, knowing that shortly there will be a public announcement of the news. So, any person having any kind of professional or business relationship may become a connected person, and thereby he becomes an insider if he may reasonably be expected to have access to this unpublished price sensitive information. Okay. The uh, the relationship and accessibility to this information facilitated by this relationship is necessary. Okay. Now, what are the effects of insider trading? So, the effect is borne by who? The effect of insider trading is borne by those who are not aware of this confidential information, right? People who know this information, they will not be affected. So, due to this, they do not deal in securities. Now, insider trading is unethical and it amounts to the breach of fiduciary position as it involves a breach of trust and confidence. Okay. Now, this misuse of insider information is discouraged in many ways. Okay. First of all, insider takes an unfair advantage. Second, it results in the conflict of interest, right? As it is beneficial for insiders' self-interest and not in the company's best interest. And third, the it lowers the market reputation and acts as a disincentive to invest. Okay. Now the conditional buying or selling of securities by this advantageous person only when in possession of confidential information affects the determination of the value of those securities, right? Now also, let's just suppose a hypothetical scenario of insider trading activity in which a director of a merchant bank is advising a company regarding the process of or take that company is taking over another company. Okay, so it is known that the publication of the information of a takeover offer could result in an immediate rise in the prices of shares of the target company or in that in acquiring company, right? Now the acquisition of some shares by the merchant banker in advance of this publication at pre-bid prices and disposing of them immediately after the announcement of the bid, what will this be? This will clearly constitute the act of insider trading, right? So it is essential for a fair trade that insider information must not be utilized by the directors or employees to further their own interests. Okay, doing such an act would actually amount to breach of their obligation towards the company. People will lose interest in such companies. So there should be a continuous check on such practices to ensure the integrity of securities market. Who does this? SEBI does this. Okay. Now, so USA was the first country to tackle the problem of insider trading effectively. Yet that did not stop people to do that. We must have heard the name of Martha Stewart, and we will also discuss the case of Facebook, which happened in 2019, where Facebook was supposed to pay a very huge amount of $100 million. So we will look into that, how what really happened there. In India, we have developed various regulations in this regard. So the Companies Act and the SEBI regulations 1992 are two examples of such regulations. Okay. So, the Indian government, they started giving importance to the issue of insider trading after independence. In the, after, recommendations by various committee. So this committee called Thomas Committee of 1948 evaluated the US regulations. Okay. Subsequent to this, before this section 307 and 308 were incorporated. Okay. In the Companies Act 1956, which required a big amount of disclosures from the core insiders. Core insiders, which means the directors and the employees, the most important ones. Disclosures are very important when it comes to a public company, and this was incorporated by section 307 and 308 of the Companies Act 1956. Okay. Now, in 1970s, insider trading was recognized as an undesirable practice for the first time. However, there was not adequate enforcement provision under the Companies Act. So the recommendations to formulate separate legislation in this regard was proposed by the Sachar Committee in 1979. Then came the Patel Committee in 1986. Then came the Abid Hussain Committee in 1989. Okay. And then came the SEBI. Then the establishment of SEBI happened in 1992. Now we will not go in further details of these committee recommendations, but these committees are very, very important. Every time we study in detail about SEBI and insider trading and SCRA and substantial acquisition of shares and takeover regulations and other SEBI regulations, which keep coming on time to time. We all have to read about these committees and their recommendations that they made, and hence how SEBI was formed and how SEBI keeps, bringing out these regulations. Like SEBI Prohibition of Insider Trading regulations was in 2015. That is when it came, and it was further amended in 2018. Okay. So we all know that SEBI is the regulatory authority for insider trading. Okay. Now SEBI derives its power to form the regulations for insider trading under which Act? SEBI Act 1992. Now it is the responsibility of SEBI to regulate and safeguard the securities market in India. Also, SEBI keeps a check on the insiders trading of securities. Okay. Now the Indian market is again very new as compared to other developed nations, hence it is considered to be very volatile. Okay, so but there has been, significant growth in the capital market due to the increasing number of investors. Now more people, tend to invest in securities. There is more participation of different companies. There is FDIs, there are bigger turnovers, there are more amount of mutual funds, different kinds of mutual funds, different portfolios are created, hence more number of investors has turned the size of the cap, has given a very big growth to the capital market, right? Now these growing economic reforms in our country are a big reason behind the development of capital market. Okay, so with time, this market has improved its volume, more transparency in the operations. There are more and different kinds of investment holding methods by different people that has happened. Also, the Harshad Mehta scam of 1992 and other fraudulent practices in this Indian capital market have, somewhat negatively impacted the image of the market. That because of which even now many investors fear the credibility of investment in the capital market, right, in the securities market. So some of these apprehensions, the common reasons is activity of insider trading, less transparency in transactions, there is lack of knowledge to general investors, there are unwarranted transactions, right? So these are some of the reasons why people still don't have faith. So people in India will still think that, let's just, keep an FD of our money rather than investing it in securities, because of lots of apprehensions that the people have regarding the investment policies here. So, Indian authorities have tried to regulate and encourage investments in the market through its various agencies like Company Law Board, like RBI, SEBI, and other various exchanges. Now, we have this assurance, we have this faith and trust in these authorities that people have started to tend to invest more. Okay, and likewise, various regulations from SEBI are issued from time to time to control insider trading and other malpractices also of market manipulations. Okay.
Ma'am, we have some questions here.
Hmm.
Shiv Nandini asked, what are core insiders?
Who are core insiders? Core insiders are the usually the decision takers of the company, or the policy makers of the company, or people who have the most and utmost the first hand information that the company needs to usually function, like the directors, like the promoters, or who are persons who are deemed to be the directors of the company. These people, or the CEO of the company, the legal officer, the compliance officer of the company, who actually knows about the most important decisions that the company will be taking and will be publishing later in the future. Any such information, or any company who is working as a consultant for the company of the company, those people are the core investors. Okay.
There is another question, which is about, do relatives of the employees of the company who have access to price sensitive information also come under the ambit of an insider?
Can you repeat the question? Relatives of the
Yes, relatives of any employee of the company, and that particular relative also has access to price sensitive information. Will he or she be considered an insider as well?
So usually the principal agency law is generally practiced here. What happens is that the relative, how will the relative receive the information? The relative will receive the information only if the the core insider actually provides that information. Otherwise, the relative will not get that information. So again, that relative will not be held accountable. Who will be held accountable? The employee of the company, who is the core insider. That person will be held responsible.
Okay, there is also like an example given in the chat box where Animate says that a company, for example, a company is a private limited company, and before releasing its IPO, it
Hmm.
has. I recommend you reading it out because me reading will only confuse you.
I don't see where can I find that question.
5 or 6 messages before the latest one. It's by Animesh.
Um, Animesh Baveja. Okay. A company which is a private company, let's say Zomato, before putting out its IPO, has a shared PSUI by a director which manipulates the IPO price. Would that be considered insider trading if it came before the company actually going public? Well, only publicly a company which is public, only those companies will have their shares in the stock exchanges, right? A publicly traded company will have their shares, and only then insider trading can happen, right? Insider trading can happen, and how will it be detrimental to the society if it is a public company? Until it is a public, unless it is a public company, if it's a private company, I don't know who will care about it. Like if a private company will have limited number of shareholders, right? And they will be usually it is usually very close knit. So until it becomes public, such information will not be detrimental, right? I hope I'm able to answer that question.
Yes, I think so. And there's one last question about SEBI and the Competition Commission, having a collaborative effort in some sort of an investigation. Are they, will they be able to work together? Are there any cases where you have seen them working together?
SEBI and who?
The Competition Commission of India.
Well, insider, if we talk about SEBI, so SEBI has so many roles. If we are talking about only insider trading, so then, mostly company law tribunal or SEBI or that company, I mean, SEBI under its ambit, there are lots of functions of SEBI, right? Regulatory compliancing, guiding, thousands and thousands of things that goes into work with the SEBI. So competition council going it, if we talk about just insider trading, I guess no, but there might be instances. We will take a look about it. We can further discuss about it once we discuss more about more case studies. We will discuss about some case studies too. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Now, SEBI regulations. Okay, Prohibition of Insider Trading Regulations 2015. So, insider trading is prohibited by the Companies Act 2013 and SEBI Act 1992. But SEBI has formed the SEBI Prohibition of Insider Trading Regulation 2015, which actually prescribes the rules of prohibition and restriction of insider trading in India. Okay. Now, the regulations passed by the SEBI Prohibition of Insider Trading Regulations, there are certain amendments to it in 2018 also. They are applicable mainly to dealing in securities, which involves buying, selling, or agreeing to buy, sell, or deal in any securities by any person, either as a principal or agent, by insiders on the basis of any private confidential information. Okay. The regulations are only applicable to the exchange of listed securities. The securities need to be listed. This person asked, right? Mr. Baveja asked that question. These regulations are applicable only once the securities are listed in the stock exchange. Okay. The regulations, this regulation provide that the communication or dissemination of any confidential information by an insider is prohibited. Okay. this information which is communicated or disseminated must be unauthorized for it to become for it to further lead it to insider trading. It needs to be unauthorized. The information can be used by the person himself or any other person on his behalf. Okay. If any person contravenes with any provisions of the SEBI regulation, it amounts to an offense under the Act and is punishable with imprisonment up to 10 years or a fine up to 25 crores. Okay, whichever is higher. So, under the SEBI regulations, the adjudicating officer may impose a penalty on any person who contravenes with the provisions of the regulations, except for the offense of the Act. Okay. Now, SEBI has the power to investigate the case of insider trading and related matters. Right. So, by SEBI for two very important reasons. First is to investigate into the to investigate into the complaints received from investors, intermediaries, or any person, on any matter having a bearing on the allegations of the insider trading. First is this, and second, to investigate upon its own knowledge or information in its possession to protect the interests of investors in securities against the breach of these regulations. Okay. Now, under these regulations, promoters of the company will be held liable irrespective of their shareholding status if they are found violating insider trading norms, using any unpublished price sensitive information in the absence of any legitimate purpose. Now, there are certain exceptions to these prohibitions, like for example, the disclosure is allowed for legitimate purpose, like in performance of duties or discharge of legal obligations. So, in disclosure is allowed when it is for legitimate purpose, and disclosure is allowed when there is an obligation to make an open offer, right? And where disclosure is required in the best interest of the company. In such cases, so these become the exceptions to the prohibitions that are laid down by the SEBI. Okay. Now, what are the loopholes in our legislation? So so we understand that the regulation of this practice of insider trading, regulating this is quite a task for the authorities, right? In their annual report, the SEBI's annual report, it was revealed that the investigations taken up by the SEBI, the insider trading cases covered 14% of the cases, which were actually 34 in number in 2016 and 2017. Whereas in 2012, it was in 2015-16, it was 12. So in one year, it was the previous year there were 12 cases of insider trading. The next year there were 34. So with each passing year, the offense of insider trading is significantly increasing. So there is a demand for stricter regulation, and that is why there keeps coming these amendments. Also, the pendency of the cases is also a major concern, because not every case is actually finished basically. So usually what happens is the allegations of insider trading, they are raised on the basis of circumstantial evidence. Like, nobody's gonna catch somebody red-handed, right? Somebody's like actually using, they will not catch them like in the process of it. So basically they are all circumstantial evidence, and lack of very concrete evidence makes it very difficult to detect and prove the offense, right? Although our system is quite robust, but the rate of success in investigating these cases are very less. So this is because SEBI does not hold the right now, presently, it does not have the technological expertise to actively perform investigations. There is, of course, acute shortage of resources and manpower. That is also one of the reasons for SEBI to not be able to effectively perform these investigations. And there are some certain loopholes in the Indian law, and which does not cover the cases where the offense of insider trading has been committed by a foreign national. So there are no law regarding that. Also, so this lack of this act, our act lacks the application on the extraterritorial applicability also. So insider trading is of course a menace. Now, why we say that? Why does it matter? Nobody gets hurt, nobody gets harmed. You might as well consider it a victimless crime. So it's not victimless crime. You know why? Because it's like throwing sand in the gears of our financial markets. People trading on insider information, inside information, they benefit at the expense of others. How? Because a very important characteristic of a well functioning financial market is high liquidity, which means that it is easy to make large trades at low transaction costs. Now, insider trading adversely affects the markets. Now, liquidity, how it affects, it's adversely affecting the market's liquidity, and it makes the transaction cost higher. The transaction costs get higher, that it reduces the investor returns. And now, since people have gained a lot of consciousness about how to smartly invest their money, a lot of people have this stake in financial markets, right, either directly or indirectly. So this kind of behavior hurts a lot of people. Now, who is responsible? Who should be primarily responsible for securities laws violations? So, under our Indian laws, the principal is liable for any fraud or misrepresentation committed by their agents, right, within the scope of the agent's authority. Now, where a company is a principal, it would also be liable for any fraud of its officers, right? So the liability of the company will depend upon the extent to which the fraudulent state of mind of an officer is attributable to the company. So these principles are also applicable to the issue of prospectus containing fraudulent or misleading statements. Okay, the company will be liable. When will the company be liable? When the misrepresentations are made by the directors or other general agents of the company entitled to act on behalf of the company, or there are misrepresentations made by the agent who is specially authorized for this purpose, or when the directors making the allotment of shares were aware of the fact of misrepresentation, and or they also knew that the applicants for shares were induced by misrepresentation, and when to the knowledge of the company or its agents the contract is made on the basis of particular representation that later turns out to be untrue. Okay, so the company will be held liable in such a cases. Okay, now section 35 of the Companies Act, it specifically imposes liability on every person who has authorized the issue of prospectus, which includes the directors, the promoters, and experts named as such in the prospectus. Okay. Now, our law also recognizes the principle of vicarious liability of every person who, at the time of the offense was conducted, was either in charge or was responsible for the conduct of business of the company. Correct? Now, this principle is also recognized by the SEBI, and it has been upheld by the Supreme Court also in various cases. Now, there are certain instances where there are claims against the directors. Who is a director? If we have studied company law, we will know that director, there is a certain definition for director, who is considered director, who all are included as a director. It is so needless to really explain that here. So the term director basically is in India, it includes a person appointed as director and a person acting in that capacity. In very simple layman terms, that is the person who is actually appointed as a director and who is acting in such capacity. Now, the liability of directors with respect to the issuance of securities that is given in section 34 and 35 of the Companies Act 2013. Okay. Now, this director may attract both civil and criminal liability for issuing a misleading prospectus. How is the security listed in the exchange. First, when a company is coming up with an IPO, the first thing is prospectus. Now there are different types of prospectus. There is red herring prospectus. There are so many types of prospectus. So the first thing is any person will invest in a company by reading the prospectus. So whenever there is issuance of an IPO, if the prospectus is misleading, how the director will also attract civil and criminal liability for issuing a misleading prospectus. Now civil liability is vested in directors irrespective of whether there was an intention to issue a misleading prospectus, but if there was an intention, the liability is of course greater. Now, criminal liability is vested in directors only when there is an intention to defraud potential investors and when there was knowledge of misleading statements or omissions. Okay. However, the liability of independent directors is rather different and contentious, as penal action against independent directors can only be initiated after the registrar of the companies concludes that the debtor is an officer in default. Okay, there are certain. So when we study company law, we will see there are so many different kinds of directors also. So only exemption or only exception to this rule is of independent directors, which can only liability will be initiated against such independent directors only when the registrar of the company does as such. Okay, this protection has been accorded to safeguard the interest of the independent directors. Okay, now there are also, in case of such malpractice, there can be claims also against the underwriters. Okay, so the underwriters and intermediaries who are involved in the listing of securities are also governed by the regulations which are framed by the SEBI. Now, the merchant bankers, they are required to conduct a comprehensive due diligence for the purpose of meeting with you can say the statutory obligations and to reduce the risk that are involved in a transaction. So these merchant bankers are required to do a very comprehensive due diligence. Now the liability of merchant bankers has increased with the increase in the statutory compliance and other mandates that are being written by the SEBI. Now, the merchant bankers actually cannot limit themselves to conducting due diligence merely to comply with the statutory requirements, but they are also required to play a more active role with intent to ensure that all the disclosures made in the offer document are true and fair in every respect. Okay, they need to make sure of that, not just for the heck of actually doing it. So if the merchant bankers are in default, then they can be subjected to a penalty and can also be made liable for suspension or even cancellation of their license. Okay, there has been in the past, SEBI has actually suspended the registration of underwriters in cases where it was found that the underwriters had not carried out their duty of conducting a comprehensive due diligence, in a proper manner. Okay. Then there are also claims against auditors. In the event of auditors' non-compliance with the provisions of course, Company Act 2013, he or she could be punished with a fine of not less than 5,000 rupees, which may extend to 5 lakh rupees. Okay. However, if these provisions are contravened knowingly or willfully with an intention to deceive the company or its shareholders or its creditors or tax authorities, the auditor would be punishable with an imprisonment for a term which may extend to 3 years or I'm not sure, either 3 years or 1 year, with a fine which can be ranging from 1 lakh to 25 lakh rupees also. Okay. Also, in the event that an auditor is convicted of non-compliance, he can be made liable to refund the remuneration received by him and can also be required to pay for damages suffered by the company, the statutory bodies or authorities, or any persons for loss arising out of incorrect or misleading statements or of any particulars that is made in his behalf in his audit report. Okay, so these are the people against whom claims can be made. Okay, now I would like to give a very recent example of the Facebook case. Like in 2000, in 2019, this happened that in India we have SEBI, which is Securities Exchange Board of India. Likewise, in US there is SEC, which is Securities and Exchange Commission. Okay, so in a press release, SEC has stated that Facebook has agreed to pay $100 million to settle these charges. Now, what exactly was the charge? Okay, so this was what happened was Facebook had considered improper use of user data as a material risk and had been highlighting the risk in public filings also since its initial public offering in 2012. When they came up with an IPO, they have considered improper use of user data as a material risk and had been highlighting this in public filings also. Okay, in its prospectus, उसका जो prospectus है उसमें Facebook had stated that if third parties or platform developers fail to adopt or adhere to adequate data practices or fail to comply with our terms and policies, or in the event of breach of their networks, our users' data may be improperly accessed or disclosed. Now, this prospectus, the meaning of this thing is that, what used to happen is earlier there was the privacy. There were other third party platforms where they used Facebook data to do their data analytics, or the data was sold to another company and made millions of dollars worth of profit. Okay, now this is the meaning of what I just mentioned. So the prospectus further stated that such incidents could have a material and adverse effect on the business reputation or financial results of Facebook. Okay, now in the periodic reports that listed companies in the US are required to submit to the SEC post listing, they are required to include details of the risks. Like in US, it's very stringent for companies because the US economy is the biggest economy in the world, and all the the biggest technology companies are all based out of US. So they are required to even include details of the risks which are perceived by the management. In their Securities and Exchange Commission reports, they are required to post also that. So accordingly, Facebook also included disclosure in the risk factors similar to the prospectus in its quarterly and annual filings with the SEC from 2012 to 2015. Now, the complaint, what was the exact complaint? The SEC complaint that was made in December 2015. The newspaper articles reported that a research company had obtained Facebook data from millions of users of the social media platform and used such data in the American elections. Okay. Thereafter, an employee of Facebook contacted the research company that had access to such user data and concluded that user data was collected and transferred to the research company in violation of Facebook's own policy for third-party app developers. Now, the SEC complaint also alleges that in December 2015, there were suspicions within Facebook. Even within the company, even within Facebook, there were suspicions about a third party having misused its user data. Imagine there are so many users, there are millions and billions of Facebook users having that much big amount of data and using it for a third party benefit. That is such a huge responsibility upon Facebook to take care of the users. So if the users, how artificial intelligence works, right? Like we are thinking sometimes, we talk about certain things and we get to see the search results, we get to see posts of such things. How that happens through artificial intelligence. through robotics. So this millions and this billion amount of data, it was used in the US elections in 2015 in December. So in its what the Facebook did in its periodic filings made with the SEC between January 16 and March 2000, in January 2016 until March 2018, Facebook continued to state that any failure to prevent or mitigate security breaches and improper access to or disclosure of our data or user data could result in the loss of misuse of such data. Okay, this would, what will happen, this would harm our business and reputation and diminish our competitive position. It also stated that developers fail to adopt or adhere to adequate data security practices and blah 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 blah. This is what happened. So, according to the SEC complaint, when Facebook first publicly acknowledged that it had learned of such violation of its policy on March 2018, the share price of the Facebook substantially declined. Now, accordingly, the SEC complaint alleged that despite having confirmations that user data has been misused and red flags raised, Facebook did not evaluate how the risk factor disclosure in SEC filings should be altered basis, this information, and made a material omission in its disclosures. Now, Facebook happily agreed to pay 100 million to settle these charges. So, to conclude, it is very important to understand there are so many learnings for the Indian securities market, that what should be done, what are the the principles which were underlying the SEC's charges are relevant, how they are relevant for the Indian securities market as well. So, how it is important and what can be done. So, a close scrutiny of risk factors should, and how the risk should be mitigated, should be clearly identified and should be filed very regularly with the SEBI. Issuers means people who are issuing their securities. Issuers in India should review the risk factors in their offer documents and should carefully assess whether they are presenting the risk correctly or not. Offer documents, we have all heard of it. Offer documents are subject to market risks and stuff like that. So offer documents are typically drafted to include a variety of risk factors, which are drafted to cover potential events, to include all the risk factors that will cause a material adverse effect on the company. Okay. However, this Facebook complaint shows that there is a material difference between a potential or hypothetical risk and a risk that has actually materialized, right? There is a material difference between this. Now, issuers should scrutinize risk factors to assess whether any of the risks have actually materialized, so that the disclosure related to risk factors can be suitably modified. Additionally, the risk management function of the company should also be involved in the drafting of offer documents, and continuous disclosure should be done. So there should be this requirement of continuous disclosure for companies, particularly for banks, for NBFCs and other companies who are operating in highly regulated sectors. So, redesigning the internal processes is very important. Improving the continuous disclosure requirements, that is again very essential. Periodic filings for listed company, to update their offer documents. We do it annually, but when we study all of these, when we study the lacunas in our system, that this should be done on a very even much often than quarterly basis. So in India, while Regulation 35 of the SEBI listing regulation prescribes an annual information memorandum which should be submitted by the listed entities, the SEBI has not yet really operationalized this provision. Okay. So I think that is how we understand that how insider trading hampers our economy, how these investigation, how they take place if there are allegations of non-disclosure of material information, and how it can be curbed. So I think this brings us to the end of our session about the insider trading. Any questions, anyone?
Yeah, so ma'am, there was a follow-up by Animesh to that hypothetical. I think you have answered that in your lecture, but I think you can read it once. Just above Arpit sir's comment. Ma'am, you are unmuted. Sorry, you're muted. You're muted.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, okay.
So Animesh is asking, manipulation of IPO price is also in public interest. If I have manipulation of IPO price is also in public interest, how is it in public interest? If I have put in money for a lot and after the PSUI being leaked, the IPO price then falls down and the price opens lower than the listed price, falls down and the price opens lower than the listed price, wouldn't that create public chaos? So, what is the question here? I don't get the question.
Animesh, I think you can just elaborate your question in the comments. Until then, I ask anyone else who has questions to ask ma'am about insider trading or the jurisprudence in developing SEBI or what SEBI has to do to make itself a better regulatory body. Any questions regarding that would be really invited, and please ask them in the chat box or the question and answer session. I haven't received any questions. We'll just wait for a minute more and then we'll see. There is a question. Pradipta, Pradipta is asking what is a demerger. I think I answered that earlier, but you can also answer it. What is a demerger?
Well, well, this is a very detailed subject. So, demerger is basically, separation of a company into, when a large company is actually into two or more smaller organization, particularly pertaining to the, dissolution of an earlier merger. So, it is basically a very vast topic, but that is not related to our insider trading here. Um, So I don't think we need to cover that topic right now.
Yeah, so any relevant questions? Yeah, Animesh has replied with, I think, a more comprehensive question.
Whether a PSUI before the IPO being open to public, still private, will be called insider trading because once the private. Until and unless the company is not listed publicly, there wouldn't be insider trading because it is not traded publicly.
I hope that answers your question, Animesh. Pradipta, as I explained to you, Thomas Committee was the name of a committee which was a series of committees in India which were used to form before SEBI came into force, these were the committees we were developing the jurisprudence of SEBI, and after that, SEBI was formed, as ma'am explained in a presentation. Any other relevant questions here? I think it's fine. Animesh is also satisfied. Um, okay, there's a personal question here. Naman asked that after doing the company secretary, should I go for the SEBI examination or should he continue to practice company secretary?
Where is this question?
The last one by
SEBI.
Naman.
Okay. Okay. After CS, should I go for SEBI exam or No, because you have see. So if you are becoming a CS, or you are in the process of becoming a CS, or you are a CS, I think you should work in a company. Any it is usually the dream of a company secretary to work in a company which is about to bring an IPO, because that is when the most learning happens in the entire life of a company. The IPO comes only maybe two times maximum, three times maximum. So it is a very prestigious moment to work for an IPO. So definitely, if you are a CS, you should definitely work as a CS. For SEBI would be, you will be, of course, there will be a wide array of duties that you will need to perform. But if you can still work at SEBI if you want to, if you want to work as a company secretary in SEBI. But I would, if it were me and if I were a company secretary, I would look to work for a emerging new company with who is growing rapidly and who is about to bring an IPO. Definitely working towards IPO is something that is a dream job, because you will learn so many things, and IPO is not a small thing. It brings a lot of responsibilities. It is a very huge thing. So working as a company secretary with the company will make more sense if you are.
Uh, there is another, a career question here. Animesh asked that he's already interning with a law firm and preparing for the SEBI grade A examination. So is it possible to do both simultaneously?
To work with a law firm and also prepare for a SEBI exam?
Grade A
I
examination,
mean, it
yes.
really depends. Of course, working with a law firm will bring you different sort of, what kind of a law firm you're working with. It will depend upon that, and what if your work is related, if your exam is related to the work that this law firm is into in that business, then that will be something that would be an added benefit. So if you can manage both, it really depends if you are able to manage both of them. So yeah, that should work for you if you are somebody who can balance things. Animesh, the working hours exhaust every ounce of me. I think you should have electrol or maybe have some energy drinks and just, work robustly.
I think, yeah, sir has also said that studying for the exam and focusing on it is a better strategy to go about.
Hmm.
I think there are no more relevant questions related to what ma'am taught. I thought it was a very interesting lecture. I would like all the students to fill out both the forms for feedback and for mentorship on the WhatsApp group. And I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Purvi ma'am and Arpit sir, both of you guys. Arpit sir for his earlier exceptional webinar also, which created so much interest that students joined this masterclass for 5 days. So thank you so much. I myself learned a lot from both of you, and we would like to have you again once an opportunity arises. Best of luck for your new venture also. So see you guys, and to all the students, we'll reschedule the class which was missed, and we'll let you know the details on WhatsApp. Okay, bye guys. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.